Hey, good everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Men's Room. Today we're joined by Linda Tilson, transformational re-engineer of life, myself, the bearded wordsmith, or I was, and Brian Muka, who is an ex-military member and now is a life coach, I'd say. I'm not exactly sure, but I'll let you take the reins from there.
Yeah, I guess from the outside, I look a lot like a life coach. I guess really what I do is I reflect your gift back to you. So I'm like a mirror. I get to use my experience as a special operations officer in the United States Navy. I was a bomb technician, and I allowed unworthiness to spell out the early end of my military career. It's actually my boyhood dream to jump out of airplanes and Secret Service missions all over the world. It taught me a lot. I got fired right before I went to Afghanistan. And that was in 2011. And that started my building back from my first life avalanche. So I help people do the same. How do we take the brakes off the dreams? How do we go underneath the bed, the closet, under the house, find the boogeyman and set it free? And so we take the brakes off our dreams. Um, yeah, I like working with entrepreneurs, special operations folks. I help them get back into their heart. And occasionally I get to work with some Jedis and help them find their gift below their gift.
It's always entertaining when you're able to work with fellow service members and help probably heal some of the wounds that they don't physically see. Because not every person has those sort of physical wounds. People more have mental issues and stuff like this, and depression and what it may be. And sometimes you just
Mhm.
sort of help be there for a conversation or help alleviate the issues by giving them insight into certain aspects and how they can fix it. So,
Sometimes it's enough to just listen.
yeah, that's exactly it. It's just sitting there being an ear for someone to vent to. And more often than not, people like that just don't have someone to talk to. And coming into the right space, like what you can do, allows them to just sit there and sort of vent, and then you can absorb that information, be like, well, just try this or just try that maybe, and that might be able to help the problem area.
Yes, sir.
So anything you'd like to touch upon here, Linda?
So I know, Brian, that you do a lot of speaking to sleep. So being able to sleep more healthily and breathing. And so I know you're certified in some breathing techniques. And so I wanted to
Mhm.
hear a little bit more about how those two particular lines really fit into what you just described for being that mirror back to people, how those two integrate in.
That's a great question. Let me take a stab at this with words. Breathing is such a fantastic, magical thing. It's kind of like a magic carpet. So we could go down the breathing mechanics rabbit hole. But what I found in my 2,600 days in a row of having a daily breath practice, just knowing that the breath is there to support us is really useful. Specifically for me, with my sleep, I was scared to sleep. I was scared to leave Earth. And so by breathing deeply, I can breathe into certainty in uncertain times. The sleep thing is a really interesting conversation because sometimes it's about nutrition, sometimes it's about stress, overwhelm. There's an emotional component, there's a physical component, there's a food component. Sometimes there's a mechanical component. I worked with a guy a couple weeks ago, CPAP. He hasn't taken a breath through his nose in 35 years. And so when we can find the rest and digest phase, the parasympathetic, we can often lead that. I find that can be led through the breath. And so that becomes the magic carpet getting into the heart. And then it opens up to some spiritual gifts. So it depends on where somebody's at. And the breath right now, I'm thankful. It's a pretty universal concept. There's nobody fighting me on breath is useful. It's always, I should probably do that. I wonder why I'm not. And then the next question is, well, have you found a breathing style that you like? No, I don't. I don't do the Wim Hof. I'd like to. Okay. Well, let's find your specific breath that's unique to you, like a thumbprint. So that's kind of a first stage. And then we mentioned some third and fourth stage Jedi stuff. And by breathing through the heart, we can tap into quantum entanglement and have access to all wisdom, knowledge, and experience or any person, past, present, or future. It's kind of how channeling works for me. So, like, depending on your audience, we can take that conversation anywhere you'd like.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking about is that when people become stressed, when they're having trouble managing or regulating their emotions, the first thing that people do is they start shallow breathing or forget to breathe, and it causes all these other physiological symptoms. And so, you know, people forget about the most basic element. We have to breathe to live. And when we can tap into our breath, that we can actually bring ourselves back and ground ourselves. And, you know, there's a lot of applications. I mean, some of us are aware that when you're working out and you're working on lifting and pulling and doing machines and that type of work, if you can breathe through it, that's very useful. You can lift, you know, larger and longer as far as weights and whatnot. And as a woman, I didn't take that silly breathing that people a lot of times think is worthless. When I had my kids, I actually took it to heart and did it. And whether or not I did it in the preferred way that it's taught or not didn't make any difference. But I did that, and that just made the experience so much easier. And so fast forward, when you are in a place where you're not exercising and you're not giving birth and you're just in the workplace, or you're just in a situation, maybe in a situation of combat, maybe you're in a situation of, like I said, workplace, any of these places, and you got to get to that place of calm, collected. And so tapping in and breathing in that moment can really move people. And so for me, when I read that on your profile, of that's something that you do along with the sleeping, because again, sleeping is also that thing that we, a lot of us like to get enough to get it done, and actually we need it more than we think we do for healing all kinds of things, both and restoration, so you can be at your prime, you can be at the top of your game. And because those two together, you can't make good decisions when you're not grounded and you're not rested. You're just going to make poor decisions, and you're just going to be flighty, and the regulation of emotions is just all over the place. I see it often, especially in high stress situations.
Yeah, a couple things. So there's an optimal amount of stress. Stress, I found a requirement for flow states. So, think about a ramp of an airplane I'm about to jump out of. The higher the nerves, the higher the exhilaration, to a point. So, in studying neurotropics and other supplementation, it's an upside down U curve. So if I'm missing a certain nutrient and I add it, my performance is going to increase, and it will tabletop off like a mesa. And then eventually, if I keep adding, it's going to fall off. Stress is exactly the same. So there's an optimal amount of stress. Finding that if I can breathe in and feel my heartbeat for 3 to 5 beats, I can tell what my heart rate variability is. I can tell what my stress is based on how hard my heart's beating or how softly it flutters. Gives us a lot of feedback. And finding also, if I notice my heart, I can find stillness. So that's becoming a really magical part. If I can find a place of calm in the midst of a storm, whoever is the most calm has the most options.
That is 100% true. With that, is to touch upon your breathing techniques, is oxygen is power. I've always sort of believed that the more oxygen which you obtain, the more powerful that you will be able to feel and also think. Because if you want to think clearly, you need to have a steady supply of oxygen. And to be able to think fast, it's the same sort of thing. So it's where I do take time to listen to oneself, so to speak. I did so much in the past when I was drinking and smoking and doing shit as a young fella that you usually do. And it's not until you pay that toll of I'm an idiot and realize that, do you start realizing that I should get back on the bandwagon of how I used to be. And that's where it's definitely helped again, trying to just center oneself and remaining neutral. So not letting emotions guide you, but because I 100% agree, the more people who stay in that middle ground, they have 10 times more options opposed to someone who's sitting there angry or too excited because they're too focused on that emotion or they're too influenced by it. But if you remain neutral, you can look at it with an objective eye and be like, we do this, we can do this, we can do that. And you can continue moving forward steadily by just thinking of it objectively with reason and logic. And by using breathing techniques on top of that, it just enhances the options ever more.
Yes. So I'm going to take what you just said, Mikeul. I believe that. And there's layers deeper than that if you're interested in that. So it's not just oxygen. So James Nestor wrote a book called Breathe. And the thesis of that book, and also the O2 advantage, Hypercapnia, increased levels of CO2 is actually like a hormone. So what the Wim Hof method does, it cycles between heat and cold. So vasal dilation, vasal constriction, and also we can alter blood gases if we start to sort of manipulate how much CO2 is dissolved in the bloodstream. Some interesting things happen. So you guys may be familiar with nitric oxide. It won Molecule of the Year in 1997. It's a pre-workout supplement. It's responsible for vasodilation. This is also related to sexual mastery. So the little blue pill relies on vasodilation. This is actually a really important indicator of cardiovascular health. So there's two things I want to share on cardiovascular health. So if I breathe in and I let it go and I start to count with my lungs empty, if I can only hold my breath for 5 seconds there, I'm going to have a heart attack. There's so much duress for the cardiac system, cardiopulmonary system. I want to be in the 30 to 35 second range. And so as I hold my breath, and if you do this at home, you might notice some air hunger. As the air hunger increases, so does carbon dioxide. So a really interesting thing, we can prove this. Soda water, LaCroix, I don't know what you guys drink down under, but gas bubbles inside the water, it's carbon dioxide. And so a really powerful hack, if I'm ever feeling sleepy, is I'll drink soda water. Because with the carbon dioxide, like if I suck out all of the carbon dioxide from your body, you'll die. You'll asphyxiate. There's no way to get to the oxygen without carbon dioxide. And so for like high altitude breathing, Wim Hof taught me this, the double in and then out through the nose. So if I'm going at a really hard clip, I want to retain my carbon dioxide because the higher my CO2, the more oxygen I have access to. Also, the higher CO2 is, the higher nitric oxide is. So it's a powerful vasodilator. So it opens up the sinuses, it opens up the lobes in the lungs, and we actually become a lot more efficient, not only in breathing, not only in thinking more clearly, but also at an ATP level. So a nose breath creates 34 units of ATP to every mouth breath. It's using the Krebs cycle to make access to energy through adenine triphosphate. And if I'm breathing through the mouth, I'm increasing cortisol. I'm increasing adrenaline. I'm turning off the immune system. And the more I'm blowing off CO2, so the less oxygen I have, to the point where it actually shuts the human brain off and I become a reptile. What I notice in my breathing clients is most people breathe like this. See how my chest is going up, fighting gravity, and I'm also working against the resistance in the chest. And if I breathe into my belly like a baby, and I just let the breath go, instantly in one breath, I'm calm. So we have somewhere between 10,000 and 14,000 opportunities to choose peace or stress. So, there's a decision every breath.
So that's sort of an interesting bit of thought there, because I do similar things, but I thought of them in different ways. I like drinking soda water for the fact of the carbonation, because I used to drink a lot of Coke, and that was what I was addicted to for a long time. And I enjoy the carbonation feeling more than anything. And it sort of makes sense with the CO2 bubbles, because often when I find myself without soda water, it's sort of like a mental fog. I'm not too sure, like not 100% capacity, and I never contributed that to soda water. I just thought it was because I wasn't focused enough, because I was sitting there too distracted wanting soda water, opposed to how much it's actually probably helping me. The other thing is I use two different styles of breathing. So when I'm awake and alert, I breathe with my chest. When I'm trying to go to sleep, I breathe with my stomach. And I've noticed that helps greatly, because if you sit there and breathe with your chest when you're trying to go to sleep, you're 10 times more alert. You're trying to fight to go to sleep. And that's where, if you breathe with your stomach, you sort of just slip into that sleep before you even notice. And I've also used a military style of sleeping. So I can go to sleep within one toss of the pillow. And it's always been that way, unless I'm sat there and I've eaten like tons of sugar and had coffee before bed. But 9 times out of 10, I can go to sleep straight away. So I agree 100% with what you're saying there. Is breathing through the chest opposed to the stomach has different effects on the human physiological changes in the way in which we respond to things.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I like when I'm starting to teach somebody breath, they're like, it's always good to breathe through the nose, right? Maybe, Sometimes it makes sense to breathe through the mouth. Sometimes it makes sense to breathe into the chest. Chest breath, I can make DMT, I can make painkillers, I can make endocannabinoids. So if I start to learn the principles, I can apply that knowledge to how am I in relation to my environment, and how can I triangulate the breath to give me what I need in the moment? And this is a big model in this, right? So there's a sort of a big debate. It's kind of answered. Is it more powerful to change the thought to change the body, or change the body for the thought? And I'm
Why,
finding that when I change, huh?
why only one? Why not both?
I used to think it was bi-directional, and now I'm of the persuasion that if I have a much higher probability of leading my mind through my body. So right now my microphone is forward, I'm presenting, and so I tend to lean forward. The position I want to be in is shoulders back, chest up, and actually hands up. So when I'm in this position, I can already feel my body changing. And so I'm using the physiology to change the psychology. So for me, what I found was the physiology changes the psychology, and both are regulated by the pulmonology. So breath becomes an amazing drug to change my physical chemistry. It's the only thing that both the body and the mind have to listen to, because 3 minutes later, I'm dead. So it's a powerful lever arm.
That's where I sort of use both to influence how I feel, because I've noticed both have a positive impact on each other. It can be a negative feedback loop and a positive one, depending on how you position yourself. So if you're sitting there slouched over all day, shallow in breathing, and then you're not in the right headspace, then you'll continue to spiral down. But
Yes.
if you're the opposite, if you stand confident and true, shoulders back, sort of as you said, aligning your spine correctly and standing or sitting correctly, you'll find that you'll start changing your thoughts as well. But if you have positive thoughts on top of that changing of the body, then it's going to be a positive upward movement. And it took me some while to understand that to think about yourself as if you're the ultimate version of yourself and what you would want to look like and be like. And I sort of use that to think of, well, if I were to be the best version of myself, I'd be sitting like this, I'd be breathing like this, I'd be thinking like this. And that's what sort of helped me get to the stage where I am today, where I can think about a lot of different things, because I have that sort of framework in the back of my mind of I need to be like this in order to, or I need to, be like this in order to think like this. That's the best way to sort of
Exactly.
put it.
Yeah, and I'm sure this doesn't apply to anybody. It applies to me. When I was deep in the cave of unworthiness, it was not possible for me to outthink that lie. And so by using the breath and changing the physiology, I can interrupt the thought patterns. That's the point. I agree with everything you said. And if you ever find yourself stuck in that negative feedback loop in the mind, change the body, change the breath. Way more effective. I don't think I've ever outthought my way back to inner freedom.
It's
Yeah, it's
true.
sort of an interesting perspective. You go, Linda.
No, I say it's true, and when you need to change something, something has to change. And so I like that whole thinking of the one word interrupt. If you can just keep that word in your, I guess in your back pocket of tools to interrupt in whatever way possible, whether it's change position, breathe, or anything. So I just wanted to, bring that to light, that I really like that easy to implement thought there.
It can be easy. Yeah,
Mhm.
just one breath away from peace.
Yes.
Yeah, I've sort of had times when I've been able to think myself out of certain situations, but there is a time when I think there are unique situations. For me, it's more so staying active, I guess, getting the endorphins going by like working out of bed or working on yourself, because it gives you confidence with your actions, and it also um, sort of builds trust with yourself, because if you aren't working on one, then the other will sort of slowly falter and fall. So you'll see
Yes,
people
strong
that are,
body.
well, yeah, you'll see people that are extremely fat and have a lot of issues with them, like they're like 160 kilos or something, and they're just unhappy with life. And then it sort of correlates with their mental state, because they're sitting there feeding their face with garbage, feeding their body with garbage, and in turn they feel like garbage. Like they're not working on themselves, they're not
Mhm.
eating healthy, they're not looking after their um, their temple, so to speak. The best way to sort of, I think, put it is the way your temple is the way in which you meditate inside that temple. So if your temple is degraded, full of fat, and full of shit, then it's going to be a really hard time to meditate on the thoughts in which you need to have a positive impact. But if you're constantly working out, staying physically fit, getting out and about, and sort of just staying on top of your physical health, then that temple is going to be a lot more of an inviting environment for you to have those positive thoughts to think about things. And it is like they both go hand in hand, because it wasn't until I started working out did I notice the actual mental benefits of working out regularly. Like, sure, you've got to get over the procrastination stage of, do I really want to work out? Do I need to do this? Can't I just have a day off, or that sort of shit? And it's not until you start having those days off do you realize, well, this is actually really affecting me. Like, this is something that has a big role in how I function and how I am. And then once you start getting those endorphins running again by working out, or even going for a run or a walk or something, you notice there's a positive upward trend with your mental state. And sort of telling your mental state when you haven't worked out to shut up and get over itself, so that way you can get out and work out. Because if you sit there and think, oh, I don't feel like doing it, you'll never feel like working out. You have to get to that mental stage of,
oh man,
you go.
There's a one word with a question mark. I don't ever feel like doing an ice bath. There's been 2 that I look forward to of the 1,400 I think that I've done. Oh, I don't want to get any ice bath. And I like play up my little bitch voice. And as soon as I'm done bitching, it goes, and question mark. Cool, we do it anyway. There's just so much power in that. What I realized this week is when it feels hard, what does that mean? And Saturday was very uncomfortable. Entrepreneurship, a lot of life pressure stuff. And I'm like, I run an invincibility dojo. So I love when this comes up, because like I get to work on my own process. I'm not cured. I just know how to dance with it. I'm always learning. And so Saturday night at 11:30, I told no one of what I was going through in this suffering I found myself in. And I was like, man, there's going to be a breakthrough. I just got to sit in it. I got to go deeper. I got to breathe it in. No separation. Let me be it. And at 11:30 at night, this quote from Muhammad Ali came to mind. Muhammad Ali, how many sit-ups can you do? I don't know. I don't start to count until it's hard. And then I was reminded of the story. This guy, he was the keynote speaker at a cycling champ. I used to race bicycles in college. And he was the keynote, and he was talking about his race across America, so coast to coast, 3,000 miles. He did that in 6 days on a bike. It's 500 miles a day. Like that's a feat in a car. He did it on a bike in 6. The 2 things that stand out. First was when he was running from a support team through the cemetery because they had slept in 3 days. He was psychotic. And then the other one was like maybe day 4 or 5, there was a 20-knot headwind. And instead of doing 24 miles an hour forward, he's only doing 12. And he rolled the whole day that way. He made up 6 hours on his competition because they didn't even ride. And so could it be that the suffering is just joy that's unrealized? Like there's triumph doing it anyway. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And that resistance is just a gatekeeper.
There's definitely something to be said when it comes to certain types of suffering, because it does turn into enjoyment in a certain way. And other people like to feel that suffering because it makes them feel more alive, I guess, as well. Where people are too often feeling happy or lethargic and emotions like this. But when you're suffering, it's like your adrenaline gets going. It's like your flight or fight response gets going. You're like, no, I must keep pushing. I must keep going. And you sort of remind me of what David Goggin talks about too, is pushing through those times of just being unsure and just saying, screw it, let's go. Like, I'm not going to sit here and let that little bitch voice take control of me. I'm going to determine what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So did you want to say anything there, Linda?
Oh, I just was thinking about what Brian was saying about don't count until it gets hard. That I've been using that actual approach, and that I learned from my fitness trainer. We were doing that. We weren't going to count until it gets hard, And so we were just doing all these reps, all of this weight. And I could do way more than I thought I ever could do because I'm just pushing through and not counting. And then all of a sudden I could go even further. I'm like, well, this is kind of magical. I wasn't expecting this.
The SEALs have an adage that when it sucks, we're only 10% of the way there. There's still 90% left in the tank. And there was this Nepalese special forces. He did all 1,400, the tallest peaks in the world. There's 14 of them in the Himalayas. And the weather changed. He had only a week or two left. And he's like, guys, just remember when you're fucked, you're only 40% of the way fucked. And so he decided to concentrate on the other 60%. And he was able to do it. That's a great documentary on, I think it's on Netflix, but that's a great one. When the chips are down, do I focus on what's possible or what I can't do?
See, I think one of the things that helps me through is something that Jocko Wilkins said. I don't know if you know of him, but he's
Very
another
much so.
powerful. Oh yeah, yeah. No, he's an amazing person, and he said, when it sucks, embrace the suck. That's the best way to live, because as soon as you think it sucks, you're like, oh, this is so hard, I don't want to give up. That's when you'll mentally check out. But when you embrace the suck, you embrace the pain, you embrace the torment, so to speak. That's when you're like, stuff it. I enjoy this. Let's get into it. Let's see how far I can push myself into a failure. And that's when you really learn what it's like to push your limits. Like sort of what you said is, most people only work out, or most people only do things to the first 10%, because after that first 10%, they're feeling tired or worn out. But as you said, there's still another 90% in that tank. You can still take another 50, 70, or 80% right up to that line of physical failure. And that's when you can really learn what you're about.
Agreed. There's a book called Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. It makes the point that if Phil Mickelson goes in a championship golf match and he goes in anything other than I'm going to win this tournament, he has no chance of winning. Now, if he goes into that, I'm going to win the tournament, he's got a shot of winning. Most people, they get in the ring and they're already lost. They get on the sales call. This person's going to say, no, it's already lost. And so what I found in my athletic career, one of the nastiest workout is a 2K row on a Concept 2 rowing machine. It's like the exact distance where I can sprint for 7 minutes. And so the most awful part of that was the 30 minutes before the workout started. Why? I'm not under duress. I'm worried about what's going to happen. And so in practicing things like this, my mantra then was, I am unscared. How far can I go in the pain cave? I'm unscared. And my fingernails were purple. My lips were blue by the time I got done. That was as close to the end of the pain cave as I've ever been. But I was mentally ready for it.
See, I think I've had not so much worked out, but it was when we went through the floods up here in 2022, and I sort of had to shut my body and mind off to certain things because I was going through an emotional roller coaster as well as physical. I had no shoes, had nothing really to wear or anything like that. I was walking on dirt roads, um, day in and day out, asphalt roads all the time. And it was sort of through that insight that I realized that pain is only an illusion, because I was able to just push through the pain. And by the end of it, I realized that I wasn't really feeling my feet at all. Like for the first day, I was, because I was worried about how I step and what I do. And by the end of it, I was pretty much able to run across this road, and it was no problem. And it wasn't until I got back with the family and stuff and actually looked at my feet, they were cut up. I had holes all through them, but I didn't feel it because I chose not to feel something. And that's where you can push through that pain of something until you physically can't do it, so to speak. And your body's like, no, we got to check out before you check yourself out. Because like more often than not, we're able to push past those limits of, oh, I'm tired or I feel sore. And you're able to find ways of convincing, like on both ends of the spectrum, you're able to find ways to convince yourself to stop working out, then you can find ways to convince yourself to continue working out. And as for what you do, I've never done a rowing machine, so I can't speak to that, but it sounds like it's definitely a way of pushing your limits past the point of breaking, so to speak, mentally, because physically you've still got so much more energy, but mentally you're like, no, I can't do it. It hurts. And it's not until you sort of turn around and be like, no, I'm not going to sit here and listen to the way in which my mind's talking. I know it might be painful, I might be sore, I might be tiring, but I'm still going to keep pushing because I know I can.
You brought up a great point about the physical pain. and it's possible to ignore it. Um, that's a liar. So there's been days I go to the gym. This is back when I was really into CrossFit, and I felt tired and run down and sore. Somehow I'd hit a personal record that day. Not all the time, but sometimes. What does it mean? It means whatever I make it to mean. I went to
Mm.
dive school. So part of my special operations pipeline, that was our kind of our crucible. It was 40 days. I mean, they can beat us from 6 o'clock in the morning until lunchtime. And I remember the days, I'm like, man, I'm unstoppable. I was. I remember writing on my dive tanks, Instructor Albers can't hurt me. And this is when we're doing heavy hits in the bottom of the pool where they, swim around this box. And for 45 seconds, they could do anything they wanted to. Tie your regulator in knots, rough you up, knock your mask off. And all I had to do was go limp and just let it happen. And they really couldn't hurt me. And the days that I woke up sore and tired and curious, can I make it through today? Those were the hardest days, but I made that. My posture in addressing the day set the tone for the whole day. It's so important. That decision is so important. It's similar to the decision of the breath. What will I do with this breath? I'm going to find peace. We get to choose. That's what I found.
No, there's definitely a choice when it comes to that sort of thing. And you're right to go back on a previous point of a lot of people check themselves out before they've even checked in. And it is sad to see, like, you'll have these top-notch boxers check themselves out because they've seen their opponents do something that might be out of the norm. And they're like, this guy can hurt me. This guy can actually hit, or this guy's got a lot of strength. And not believing in their self and going through that because it goes with pain as well. They think, oh, once I feel pain, I'm going to stop because that's bad. And the only time I have actually physically stopped is when my body literally tells me no. And that's because I have back and neck issues. And for me, my worrisome thing at the moment is my left hand and arm has been numb for fucking a month. So I've got pinched nerves throughout my neck and stuff. And these are certain things that I have to watch out for because I like to push my physical limits. And I've pushed my physical limits so much that it's degraded my body. And it's not also through the job in which I used to have, which was cleaning. Being 6'4" and cleaning really low to the ground doesn't do good for your back. Don't know how I messed up my neck. I think that might have been my days of drinking and being an idiot. But it's hard to remember how exactly that happened. And that's where I sort of listen to how my body is. Some days I'll work out so hard that I can barely even walk the next day because my back's in so much pain. Like physically, I'm fine, but my back is what stops me because I've done damage to it. And that's where it limits my potential. They're the only times that I'm like, no, can't do shit because I'm checking out. Same with my neck. I'll have times when my neck's in so much pain that I can't even get my head off the pillow because I turn it or move it and it's excruciating. It's like I've slipped a disc in my neck because I have a tendency to slip discs in my back of my neck. I've got degenerative disc disease and scoliosis and a few other problems wrong with me. And I've learned to listen to the body in a certain extent, but only by small increments of training can you build yourself back up to being impervious. And that's where I've sort of done that with my back. My back now is almost 100%, but my neck's the temperamental one because I don't want to do the wrong workout and then turn myself into quadriplegic or paraplegic.
Yeah, you're touching in on the next point I wanted to go in this conversation. So we've got the physical level. What I found with my clients and myself is that the physical pain is actually a strong indicator for which emotional pain that I'm going through. So, for example, a few months ago, I wasn't able to run because it felt like my left heel was getting stabbed. So, if you ever had plantar fasciitis, kind of like that, but in my heel, and I tried everything. Went to the chiropractor. He said there wasn't anything mechanically wrong. It's an emotional thing. Okay. So I worked with a healer, did some spiritual work, grounded into the earth, did some Reiki, some scalar light technology. That worked until it did. And what I was doing was I was pressing even more emotional pain in my physical body. And it wasn't until I confronted the person I made out to be a villain and wept on her shoulder that my heel was able to heal. Literally the next day I could run. So for you, if I may, your left side has to do with your relationship to yourself. And so, where can you take better care of yourself? The arms has a specific meaning. I was going to look up the neck for you. I'm getting this from the book from Louise Hay's, You Can Heal Yourself. I'm not quite sure what the neck means, but your back challenges you typically have to do with either being inflexible to the changes of life or carrying the weight of the world on your back. So
Probably
let
a
me
bit of
look up.
both of those. Because my left arm has been like I can still move it. I'm going to be going back to the doctor soon because they know it's a pinched nerve. They prescribed me
Mhm.
probably the strongest anti-inflammatories you can get possibly to man, and they will knock out, I think, anyone below my size. They
Hmm.
somewhat work, but like it only blocks out the inflammation of my neck because the pinched nerve there is it's severe.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It's like a phantom pain constantly in my hand and my arm. So I don't know exactly how to fix that. I've been told that I need to go get surgery and things like that, but I'm very against surgery because that can hurt
No.
the overall physical health. And you were going to say something, buddy?
Yeah, my partner Dawn, she herniated 10 millimeters C4. And they were going to do surgery. She's like, I'm not going to do that. They were able to repair it, the natural pumping action of the discs by using traction. So it was 48 appointments. Her back is stronger than it ever was. I don't think surgery is the answer. How can we
Mm.
restore the body's natural ability to heal itself? And there's tons of ways to do that. For your neck, for example, represents flexibility, the ability to see what's back there. You talk a lot about your past. You talk about the stupid things you used to do, and looking back at it, the ability to look back with kindness, I think may do you some good in forgiving yourself for those times. That's just a download. I might be totally off on that. And the mantra that they recommend, I'm peaceful with my life, both now and then. It made you who you are. So that's self-forgiveness. I'm going to look up arms right now. How does that land for you? Is that spot on or no?
Yeah, that is kind of spot on because I do look back with kindness, but I also don't like to fall into that space because I'd rather look back and think of the mistakes I've made so it motivates me to move forwards in the right way, using those lessons to improve instead of just saying, oh, I am where I am today because of that. Like I am. I'm grateful for the experiences in which I've experienced because I wouldn't be where I am today talking with you. But at the same time, I can never let that stuff happen again. I've got to become better. I must become better. I should become the strongest version of myself that is possible with the current constraints that I've given myself. And that's where through I'd say alternative medicine, best way to word it is being able to
Hmm.
find some answers that I needed. And one of those was just self-care, but of a different type of self-care, I think.
Yeah.
Going and doing something that I love. You want to say something, Linda?
Yeah, so I was gonna say that you're moving into the space of what I was observing about how you talk to yourself and the forgiveness that Brian was talking about. You gotta change like the language that you're using when you talk about yourself
Uh,
to be
let,
kinder.
let, let, let me share one thing that's really helpful
Sure.
for men to take things.
Hmm.
Mikeul, you have the option to forgive yourself. And so I'm just posing this as an invitation to you. One of the things I used a lot with the shame and guilt from being fired from my boyhood dream was the Ho'oponopono prayer. Are you familiar with that? I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. That's for other people. So if somebody doesn't pay you, I'm slighted in some way, I will offer that prayer of forgiveness in silence for them. And what it does is it crushes the program, the subconscious programming that's happened, goes away. Now, for myself, the self forgiveness is a different prayer. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love me. I really love me. Thank you. So each one of those, the thank you makes it done. The I love you is part of the forgiveness. And especially I'm applying that now for the difficult road that I've chosen. I chose this. And so I'm forgiving myself for the hardship that I created. There's just so much power in that. And I just want to this all of your pain together makes this constellation that I can see. So the arms represents the capacity and ability to hold the experiences of life, to fully embrace the past, which made you the man that you are in today. That has to do with the arms. So the mantra for this could be, I lovingly hold and embrace my experiences with ease and with joy.
See, I'm quite the opposite. Um, like I have mixed emotions because I'm on both sides of the fence when I come to think of past experiences. Like I am grateful, but at the same time, I despise them. I wasted so much of my life away only to sit here and achieve nothing. And that's what sort of helped me change in the course of almost overnight. I felt like I gave up
Yeah.
drinking, gave up smoking, gave up smoking tobacco, all cold turkey. And it wasn't until that point did I realize that I actually had true potential. And through these
Yes.
conversations that I've had with like-minded individuals such as yourself, it gives me more insight into certain aspects that allow me to improve once again.
Yes. I heard you use the word I despise.
Mm.
That's like a resentment poison. So even in the language, I get why you did that. I get why you despise that because you never want to go back to that place. And it gave you a lot of traction. However, I find for me, the self-hatred, the shame, the guilt, the unworthiness, I got a lot of juice out of it. And it's kind of like kerosene. And kerosene with jets burns really sooty. And it gets me to 80,000, 100,000 feet. But if I want to go to the moon, I got to combine hydrogen and oxygen together and make clouds. Love, self-love, actually, is the fuel to get to the next level. So by all means, continue to use the words despise and use that dark fuel to propel you. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you're not getting any traction of it. And then it becomes time that, like, what got me here is not going to get me there idea. So when you're ready, you'll find another fuel to get you to that next stratosphere. That's what I found with my personal work and also the work with my clients.
I'm probably in the transition stage because I've always functioned from hate, so to speak. And I know you probably understand that it's just hating
Yep.
oneself, but hating the surroundings and using that negative emotion for positive because even something negative can have a positive impact. We just don't know how to use it yet. And that's how I've mostly used a lot of things. And it's not until recently have I started doing more things for myself and embracing and just taking time for myself, so to speak. Because there was a period of about 6 months where I didn't even do one thing for myself. It was just go, 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 nonstop. And it wasn't until I started to realize that I'm not so much burnt out, but I'm just mentally checked out. Like I'm just not mentally there. I can still keep going. Like I have the energy to, but it's just like the motivation and the discipline with it to the point of like, what am I doing? Where am I going? Is there any KPIs that I should be achieving? Is there any results that I'm seeing? And it's understanding that the process is sometimes longer than we first thought. What we might think is only a change that takes 6 months might actually take 2 years. And it's getting through that sort of stage, but at the same time, it was meeting people such as yourself. And I met a couple of other people on this journey privately that helped me continue to push through in certain aspects that I didn't first anticipate. Because a lot of people sit here and think that you can do good by yourself. You can go fast by yourself, but you can go far with a group. And it's
Yes.
developing that group around you that allows you to go further than what you first thought possible. It may not be the fastest way, but it might be the furthest way in which you can go.
I think it's certainly the path of least resistance. It may feel like the hardest path, but it's the most direct. That's what I'm finding. And how wonderful to be part of a tribe where we can call each other up and speak truth. And thank you for hearing my little perspective on the hatred.
Hmm.
You just mentioned, and thank you for being open to. You just mentioned I'm in a transition phase. One of the questions I found to make this human experience a lot more palatable: how can I love this too? And for me, there's just so much salvation. Like it doesn't make sense to me that the pedophilia and the way that we torture other humans. Like, what is there to love? Maybe there's an opportunity for me to do a lot of good in the world. So that's human nature. How can we love it? I don't love the crime of it, and I don't love the suffering, but it gives me a choice of how do I show up in the world. Maybe I can clean up the beach. Maybe I can share more love. You know, so
That's where it's interesting because when it comes to certain emotions and how we feel about other people's actions, I guess it comes down to how we're raised, the morals in which we have, and the values in which we treasure. For me, it's like I have like emotional things such as like honor, loyalty, respect, things like this that sort of help influence my decisions. But at the same time, I have a firm opinion on certain things only because of events that happened to me when I was younger. And that's what helped define me into the person that I am today because I've learned that life only chucks at you what it thinks you can handle. And it depends on how you interpret the lessons is how you'll come out on top. Some people will interpret a lesson as poor me, this is the world's so bad and this is all my fault. And other people will flip that on its head and be like, well, this is interesting. I like this challenge. This is a good bit of fun. Yes, I've messed
Love
up,
that.
but that doesn't stop me. And that's sort of how I've sort of been with a lot of things is embracing the suck, embracing those times when you might be down and out. You can sit there and have self-pity, or you can use that for self-motivation, self-discipline to move forwards and use that lesson for something a bit more positive. So still using that negative experience, but turning it around to something positive, because the things in which happened to me when I was younger allowed me to push past so many years. Like I got shit like happened to me when I was really, really young, but then also going through primary school and high school, getting bullied, dealing with those types of things, and having a mental disability and overcoming that mental disability in my early 20s is something that greatly benefited me. A lot of people will sit there and let limitations limit them. They're like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And I often think back to being told when I was a kid that the word can't
Yep.
is not a real word. It's just a limitation which you pose upon yourself.
Yeah,
And
two things that come to mind in your share there, the Henry Ford, if I think I can, or I think I can, I'm right. And then also in the special forces community, hey, I can't hit that shot. You can't or you won't.
yeah, that's exactly it. Like it's not until you actually try will you know. As soon as you say no, I can't, you've checked out. It's like saying that it's like the boxer analogy. How he's checked out before he's even started the match. He's like, I can't do it. Gets into the fight and he loses because he's already told himself he can't.
Very lost.
Like it's the self-talk, I guess, but it's also establishing the relationship with yourself to understand that you can do things. Just because you haven't done it before, or you might have not have done it that much, doesn't exclude the fact from you doing it. It's like a sniper pulling a 2,000-meter shot. Like, yeah, that might be extremely difficult for a lot of people, and a lot of people might be like, no, I can't do it, and they've checked out. And you've got other people that are pulling 2,000-meter shots, and they're like, that's easy. Let's go for 2,500 because they've told themselves they can. They're not going to be willing to give up after 10 failed shots. They're like, no, I will get this shot, or start to master how I shoot, adjust the scope, adjust the like look for the windage and stuff like this, and make sure you've got a good spotter as well. And that way you're able to start hitting your targets. Because if you sit there and say you can't, you might have those 10 shots and piss off. You're like, nah, can't do it. But a good sniper or someone who's determined will have those 10 shots and another 10 and another 10 until he starts and nailing that target every single shot. And he's gained the confidence, but also the competence in doing it.
Yes. Yeah. I noticed this the first time we chatted, Mikeul. I absolutely love having these conversations with you. And I notice it's sort of like not that we're playing against each other, but it's like, oh, I finally get to intellectually stimulate based on somebody who's done the work. I love that. And one of the things I've just noticed is Linda has been taking it all in. And I'm very interested and curious to hear your thoughts and maybe direct us to what might be useful for the audience.
Oh, I think everything that the two of you has shared is very interesting to the audience. One from someone like Mikeul, who's gone through these different experiences. And then on your side, Brian, as the practitioner, and then being able to have the diversity of perspectives and blending them together in a way that there can be some transition in thinking and in thought and in how a person might go about things differently. And, you know, you're not trying to change anyone. You're just putting the perspectives and the experiences that you've had and the work that you've done with your clients. And so both of you in your own way have added a lot of value, because I'm like shaking my head yes and no at both the things that you're saying, and I'm seeing where the commonalities come together. And at the end of the day, I think you both agree that if you think you can do something and you can push yourself forward to do it, knowing that you can't, even if you haven't done it before, that you're going to be there a lot quicker than if you stay in the different disempowered state, where you look back and have self-hatred, blaming other people, any of those other things that, you know, came up in conversation. So really, I think you two have really taken this interview, this experience to where I wanted it to go. And all I needed to do was create the space for it to happen. And I'm doing that from that feminine space of that loving and support and guiding and putting the space for you guys to do that and then standing back and watching it.
That's the power of the feminine. Hey, mom, I'm going to try something.
Okay.
And mom's watchful eye as we, you know, experiment and skin our knees and learn in the way that men learn.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for some aspects too, though, I've learned to not ask for the eyes of someone else and just do it. Because as you become the eldest person and there's more siblings that are being born, you tend to see that there's less eyes upon the eldest. And that's where it's an interesting perspective, because you soon learn that the actions that you used to do to like ask for like, oh, hey, mom, look at me, and hey, look at this, or like this opinion, and it sort of no longer matter, because in a way you should validate yourself. You should look at yourself and be like, well, look what I can do, not get someone else to say like, oh, you should come look what I can do. You should be looking at what you can do personally. I use that to help push me through. A lot of times it's like I grew up without a real father, so I have a stepfather, but I was a bit mentally checked out of that whole area, especially growing up. I didn't understand family quite as I do now, I guess, because I did grow up at a very young age. And that's where I sort of learned to just look at what I'm doing and using this sort of vicious cycle of fucking up, failure, and then learning from that failure. That's how I've gained so much information and knowledge, is because I've found and messed up a lot. I'm first to admit that I've messed up more times than I can count. And that's where I could have sat there and been like, oh, I'm shit, I suck, I'm not going to talk to people, I'm just going to stay in my shell. And I did not accept that. I continued to push forwards and push through and continue to look at the actions in which I was taking and be proud of the actions, even though I might not have known at the time that it was a right or the wrong decision, but I was still proud of it. And that's where it, I guess, a bit of self-love in a way, because you can sit there and
agree
say,
more. And I'm of the persuasion that there are no mistakes. Like even a misstep is part of the guidance back to the path. Like I don't think I can make mistakes. Not ultimately, because I'm not choosing to quit in that mistake. Like,
that's
holy shit,
exactly
I don't
it.
like the way that tastes. I'm never eating that again. Right? I'm never gonna do somebody that way. I didn't know what I was doing. You know, my sins of ignorance and in some cases arrogance were the course corrections. So there's a fair amount of kindness in that to myself, because you know we tend to do the best we know how to do with the resources we have at the time. That's the grace I'm giving myself, at least.
Well, you don't know what you don't know. That's the thing at the end of the day is if we sit here on the what ifs to what I should have done and what I could have done, you'll lead yourself down a dark path. Like you could sit here and think about your military experience and be like, well, I should have done this, I could have done this, I would have done this. And then you'll lead yourself to thinking the
That's a
negative thoughts
dark
that aren't
path.
needed. Well, that's exactly it. And it's thinking that I could have done so much better, I should have done this, or I should have pushed myself harder. But at the same time, you wouldn't be where you are today. There might be a reason why in which
I
that's
wouldn't have it. I wouldn't have anything to share with you guys on this podcast had I gone to Afghanistan.
well, that's the thing. You might not be on the same life trajectory. You might have ended up going there and then all of a sudden, like getting blown to smithereens or losing your legs or something like that. Because fate often has a weird and cruel life path for us. She weaves her threads in such a way that we don't first understand them. And I sort of say that sometimes we have things happen to us and we don't understand those lessons for months or years at a time. Like you'll have something happen, then all of a sudden you're like, why is this happening? And you sort of put it on the back burner and you let that thought marinate, so to speak, to ferment. And it's not until you get like months or years down the line, you're like, oh, I remember this, and this makes sense why this happened this way, because I'm in this current standing and this current point of view. It's like I think back to one of the first ways in which I met Linda. We met through a mutual acquaintance, and it wasn't until I thought back on the experience of why exactly did things play out the way they did, and what sort of initiated that. And I think it was from me communicating with one another and showing her that I'm intellectual with people that like to talk and stuff like this, and then the relationship sound between me and that person. And then I was sitting there thinking, why has this happened? What's caused this? What can I do in the future to prevent this? And it's understanding that sometimes you can't prevent those things from reoccurring. The best that you can do is come up with mitigation strategies to lessen the blow.
Yes,
Understanding
and
the reason. Oh, you go.
yeah, I'm finding I'm on the edge of my seat as I listen to you talk about your experience. It's rich. And a few minutes ago, I get triggered. This is my trigger. When I start hearing you should, it becomes a projection and an opinion. And I find myself losing the thread in that. And I just there's a deep part of me that I'm like, man, I wish Mikeul would just claim that for himself. Like I decided to do that. It's so powerful, man. And it's like sometimes if I change one word, people could start to hear me in a really powerful way. So that's just what I'm present to as you're sharing your stories and the I experiences. This is for the audience too, to really claim the stripes that we've earned. And I find that when I use the word, when you do this, no, when I did this, here's what I found. There's no resistance to it.
Well, that's sort of exactly right there. And for me, it's I think the perspective in which I perceive things, as well as the religion in which I follow, because I believe, or also some of the laws in which I follow as well. I believe fate plays a massive part in the way in which we are. We can always change the fate. The future is never set in stone, but it's understanding that the past may have an uneven thread pattern. It may look bumpy, it may look weavy, it may look discolored at times. And um, it's embracing that perspective of what's happened to me in the past is had to happen for me to be where I am in the future, or in the present, I should say. And in the future, like the future can be anything. It depends on the path in which you take in the present. And that's where I do understand the perspective in which you're coming from, but I tend to argue with myself on opinions. I guess all good people do that, but I can't sit still and say I can or I should. Because I'm like, who am I to say that sort of thing? Like, who am I to sort of definitively say, like, yes, I am my own person, but I also like to argue with myself on different aspects. And I'm like, well, what if I think about it this way? What if I think about it this way? And I'm able to gain different perspectives into life. And it's like the opinions we've been talking about today, how you've mentioned certain things. And I'm like, I agree with this, but I also agree with this because I share both sides of that coin. And I understand it. And there's also the third side of the coin, which is this side of the coin. And most people fail to see that side of the coin because they're too focused on one or the other. And I like to just explore every avenue of every opinion of every choice, because through this intellectual back and forth, do you find the answers that you might not seek, but the answers that you may be able to use later on in life. So you may come to certain like endpoints, you're like, oh, that was an interesting time. I learned some things. And then you get months or years down the line, you're like, oh shit, I can use this. I thought about this already.
Yeah, I have a model that I came into this conversation with, and Mikeul, you do too, and they're well thought out. And I know that my model isn't accurate. It's the map is never accurate of the territory. And so when we put our maps together, I realize, oh, you've got those hills better laid out than I do. And maybe I mapped the river a little more accurately than you do. And so when we triangulate together, I find a lot more accuracy in how I think the world works. So I'm just really grateful for your
It's
perspective.
like I've mapped the hills better than you, but you've mapped the rivers better than me. And with our combined knowledge, do we map the entire area whole?
Concur.
So any thoughts you'd like to touch upon this, Linda? So
I'm just enjoying the conversation, as I had mentioned before. And the other thread that I was thinking about is through this whole conversation that ownership and acceptance play a big role in all of this, in shaping who we are, what we think we can do, and where we're going. And I know that there's many more things that we could talk about in this conversation today. The conversation's been rich. I'd like to have you come back out, Brian, and we can go down this path and continue the conversation if you would accept our invitation.
Be honored to. This is great.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for bringing truth, guys.
Any closing thoughts that you'd like to touch upon before we end it up, Brian?
Yeah, what I'd like to share is just for a long time, I sought outside influences, books, courses, sages, gurus, and with my spiritual gift, this Jedi power that chose me, I looked for a teacher. I couldn't find one. Turns out the teacher was inside the whole time. And the longer I go down this path, the more I realize I don't know what's right for you. I'm finally learning what's right for me. And just a reminder that we all have a unique way to breathe and a unique prosperity code, and all we have to do is look. And there's nothing to learn, just what can I remember? That's it.
Mm. Um, well, where can people find you if they're interested in some of your services or want to have a chat? Would that be best places of LinkedIn, or you on X or Instagram?
Yeah, LinkedIn's best. You can read about what it is that I think I do. I'm hesitant to explain what I do because if we decide to have an experience together, we will co-create that. There's a website, redpillpathway.com/freedom Sherpa. That's the name of my business. There's an invitation letter and a way to book time. And I'd love for you to come and visit a few sessions in the Invincibility Dojo. Get a taste for yourself. What's this experience for you? It doesn't make any sense at all for me to try to explain it because yours will be unique for you. And I'd be honored to help show you the gifts that are below the gifts that you're aware of. So yeah, come join the tribe. Love to get to know you.
This was definitely an interesting podcast to say the least, and I look forward to having future episodes with you. So I know we can talk for hours as we have before. So definitely going to be having you back on. But to everyone listening, don't forget to just hit subscribe and like because it helps us with the algorithm, helps further our growth and stuff like this. But I'm going to end it up here, and I hope you all have an amazing day.
Thank you.